What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burnett. I want to start out this video by first of all saying thank you all, everybody who's tuned in and watched my video from North Dakota State at South Dakota State. That was an incredible environment, incredible experience. Not the most incredible game, but overall such a blast to go to that game and be able to see all you guys in the comments who are obviously either North Dakota State fans or South Dakota State fans. So thank you for tuning in. Hoping to get maybe more content like that. I'm certainly going to be trying to devote a little bit more time to talk about the FCS on this channel if my regular work, being a sports editor at the Council Bluffs Nonpareil, allows for it. But before I get into things in this video, if you go on to enjoy this video and want to see more like it, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. Diving into the Big Ten breakdown of Week 9, my number one observation is that Fernando Mendoza is, I think, the Heisman favorite. Now, he didn't put up an incredible stat line against UCLA, 213 total yards, 4 total touchdowns, but he's led this Hoosiers team incredibly on offense. You know, you look at some of the guys he has around him, yes, especially Elijah Surratt at wide receiver, some of the running backs that he has as well, but he has led this offense and this team to incredible heights. Kurt Cignetti, I think, is probably the favorite for Coach of the Year, again, considering that, yeah, that team last year was really special, but a lot of people maybe thought it could be a one-hit wonder, honestly, myself included, but he's proven that it's not the case, and Indiana's looking really good. Aiden Fisher with a pick six early in that game against UCLA kind of set the tone. The Hoosiers had 3 takeaways in that game, 2 picks and a fumble. Looking up ahead for the Hoosiers, at Maryland, at Penn State, both of those games are kind of trap games, but games they should win. Home against Wisconsin and at Purdue. I mean, the path is clear. I'll talk about it maybe a little bit later on in this video, but Hoosiers are looking really good, and there's really only one team in the Big Ten that compares to them, I think, especially because they have that win over Oregon. It's obviously Ohio State. But speaking of those Ducks, the conditions weren't great. I'll give them that, but the Oregon offense was pretty lackluster in a 21-7 win over Wisconsin. I mean, this is a Wisconsin team that gave up 34 to Ohio State and 37 to Iowa. And yes, the Hawkeyes are finding their offensive groove. They did it again this week. I'll talk about that in a second. But Oregon, 335 total yards isn't terrible, but only 132 passing. Now, yes, a lot of that's probably down to the weather, but they struggled to score still. Even when the weather is, rainy and kind of crappy, you could still find ways to score, and they kind of struggled. And they've got kind of a sneaky tough schedule to finish the season. They're at Iowa, who's 6-2, home against Minnesota, who's 5-3, home against number 23 USC, who's 5-2, and at Washington. Boy, oh boy, that rivalry game in the final week of the regular season against those Huskies in Seattle could be huge. I'll talk about that in a little bit later on too. Iowa stomps Minnesota to claim the Floyd of Rosedale. Their offense is starting to click. I saw South Dakota State this past week. They look like they could use Mark Gronowski back in those colors in Brookings, but he looked a lot better this past week. Their defense played well also, as they pretty much kind of took care of business and rolled to a win over Minnesota. Then talking about Washington, their offense kind of reawakened against Illinois in a 42-25 win. Big game for Denzel Boston. He had 153 receiving yards and a touchdown, and he also threw a passing touchdown. A little bit of trickery for the Huskies offense. Damon Williams as well. Wow. I mean, he got shut down a bit against Michigan. There were a little bit of questions that started to arise, kind of like Ohio State. I think that just shows the gap in class maybe between Washington and those teams. I think Washington does compare a lot better to teams like Illinois and some of these other teams that are kind of in that second tier of the Big Ten. Williams was 26 for 33, 280 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 66 rushing yards to bring his total to 346 total in the game. The Huskies, they're at Wisconsin, home against Purdue, at UCLA. 2 of those games are kind of trap games, and I mean, you don't want to just overlook any opponent, even the Boilermakers coming into town, but the Huskies should be 9-2. And I think I see potential in Oregon losing one of those games to Iowa or USC, but I would expect them not to. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised at all if they lose. There's some upsets that I'm surprised by. Those would not be one of them. There's a good chance, though, that Oregon and Washington meet at Oregon 1 loss, Washington 2 losses, and with potentially a college football playoff bid on the line. And if Oregon loses to Iowa or USC, that could be two loss teams. That is straight up a play-in game. That will be like a who's going to get the Big Ten's third or fourth bid. That is an exciting game to keep an eye on. Finally, in terms of the games that happened before I go over the conference hierarchy, Justice Haynes, 150 rushing yards in a 31-20 win over Michigan State for the Michigan Wolverines. Now, going over this hierarchy, Ohio State and Indiana are 1A and 1B. I would probably favor the Buckeyes slightly, but right now, the way Indiana's playing, I don't think that is a gimme for Ohio State in a likely Big Ten championship meeting. Ohio State's going to host Penn State, at Purdue, home against UCLA, home against Rutgers, and at Michigan. That is very similar, although I think the Buckeyes probably go into that one with an undefeated record most likely. That game against Michigan is going to be huge because I think Michigan could be in a similar position. Talking about those Wolverines, I have them a little bit lower down in these Big Ten rankings, but they're 6-2, 4-1, home against Purdue, at Northwestern, at Maryland. Those latter two games are both, trap games. Again, Purdue, I feel for the Boilermakers. They're getting like everybody in this top tier of the Big Ten, especially here at the end of the season. But Michigan should have two losses when the Buckeyes come into Ann Arbor, and they're going to be playing, I think, for potentially a spot in the college football playoff. Next up, kind of behind Ohio State and Indiana, though, I have Oregon. They're 7-1, 4-1. Already mentioned that schedule. They have 3 games that they'll be playing teams that are playing for their college football playoff survival. You've got Iowa, and boy, Iowa has kind of 3 games as well. They're going to host Oregon, at USC, and at Nebraska. And then for USC, they're at Nebraska, home against Northwestern, home against Iowa, at Oregon, and home against UCLA. So those 3 teams, Oregon, USC, and Iowa, each of those 3 teams have like 3 games left on their schedule. They all play each other, basically. So it's likely that one of those teams emerges. Obviously, there's also Washington there waiting in the wings. There's Nebraska as well. That game against USC this coming week is going to be big. Even if it doesn't end up getting a team into the playoff for this week at least, one of those teams will stay alive and in contention. The other one will get that third loss and be knocked out. So that's kind of my outlook. I think Ohio State and Indiana are basically on a collision course. Like, honestly, for the Buckeyes, even if they do lose to the Wolverines, they still have a good shot. Though, Michigan going into that game, I guess, I don't think they have another loss anywhere. So really, Ohio State probably, if they want to play in the Big Ten championship and if they want to beat their rivals, which I know they do, can't afford to lose that one. So I think, though, it is Ohio State and Indiana. If I had to predict that Ohio State-Michigan game, I do think the Buckeyes win that one, as much as that's bitten me the last 4 years. And then Oregon, USC, Iowa, and Washington, and even Nebraska, those 5 teams will kind of be sorted out. I think Michigan will rise up into kind of maybe that number 3 or 4 status behind Oregon, especially heading into the final week. Oregon and Washington as well, I think, will be a big meeting. And then it's just a matter of if USC or Iowa can keep themselves in that picture as well. But it's kind of sorting time in the Big Ten. We know that, at least like 2 of these teams, I guess 2 or 3, are going to end up with more than 2 losses. So it's going to kind of sort itself out on a week-by-week basis. I'll obviously be previewing these games, so kind of reveal who I think will emerge from that. But Big Ten is really exciting. I think it's kind of up in the picture, and I love that Oregon, USC, and Iowa are all playing each other, and that Nebraska's playing USC, Washington's playing against Oregon. So it should be a really fun finish to the season in the Big Ten.